And so I got to talk to some leaders, and I got a little gift bag together, put a Bible in there, pen set, and a couple other things. And we drove around. We put streamers and banners on our cars. We'd pull up in front of a senior's house, honking our horns and like screaming out the window. And then I'd walk up and give them their gift bag and talk to them about like, hey, where are you going to go to college and all that kind of stuff. Well, not too long ago, like I said, my predecessor had left before, back in 2018. And so some of these kids that were graduating knew him as their youth leader. While I had a relationship built with them, I knew that it was going to be something special if he was there. And while he was in Dallas, I brought him up on, Google Hangout, FaceTime, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And I let him talk with them. I just held the phone up like this. I have some pictures of me, like I'm just standing there like with my phone out like this. And, the seniors all loved it. And I think I even got one to almost tear up.
Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire.
Oh, you're trying to bring me down and run me out of town. You're taking what you want, but you can't take my rhythm now. I'm walking to my own beat, just gonna be me. I'm not replicating nobody.
Hey, Youth Worker on Fire, this is Doug Edwards. Welcome, Youth Worker Nation. I'm really excited to have Chase McAllister here today. We're Zooming this thing, doing it on Zoom as well as audio, and you're probably hearing it, and some of you will want to go to YouTube once we get it up there to do it. But I'm going to read his bio because Chase and I just met a few days ago. You were just retired 2 years ago, something like that, right, too? And so
no, I retired in January.
And so I hadn't given me a bio. I was interested in him because of several things. In campus life in the military and campus life on the military end of it on military bases around the world. And he was in England and not really a close friend. Tito was actually a friend of my friends, and Tito and I just knew each other. Chase was in Hawaii, and I had not gotten any hits from Hawaii. And I thought, well, you know what? I like campus life. Let's find out who's over there, who this guy is. And he was checking me out too, going, who's this guy reaching out to me? So, which you should, I expect that. And here's what he wrote. And I wanted to make sure that I get a word for it because I thought it was really good with the way he wrote it. And his life is this: 38 years young, married for 17 years this year, one daughter, 13 years old this year. Man, what a great year. 13. Been in Hawaii since 2017, second time here. He has one brother, and he's 3.5 years younger, and he has a mom and dad. His professional life is graduated and joined the Air Force, spent 20 years active duty, lived in Nebraska, Ohio, Korea, Hawaii, Louisiana. Really, Louisiana? Okay. I bet it was Shreveport. Was it Shreveport, Louisiana, Bossier City? Yeah, my brother-in-law was stationed there. I've spent some time there. Hawaii was where he retired. Deployed to Afghanistan at one time, in Iraq, spent 6 months in Qatar and 16 months in South Korea, worked in military intelligence. Sounds like you're 140 years old here. Worked in military intelligence and was a briefer by trade. Joined Youth for Christ, or YFC as we call it, in 2018. Currently enrolled as a Bachelor in Theology at Pacific Rim Christian University. Spiritual life he grew up at Far Hills United Methodist Church in Germantown Hills, Illinois. Only attended in high school and cared more about hanging with the friends than anything about the church. Then you are perfectly qualified for student ministry because you get it, right? Didn't focus on any theology or beliefs of the church. Well, this will come into play later in his life. First met Jesus in 2006, reacquainted and full acception of him in 2012, received calling in 2017 and fought God for a while until he made it clear cut that that's what he wanted. Other things, he's a big hockey fan, St. Louis Blues. When he's growing up, the Peoria Rivermen were the farm team for the Blues. He watched other sports like football, and he's a Cowboys fan only because when he was watching it, he liked the colors. It's a good reason. And a Cubs fan because he was an instigator, and my grandma was a Cardinals fan. And he said, I love looking at nice cars. I can't work on them. That's my brother's job. I grew up going to car shows, so I know a lot of songs kids of my generation aren't supposed to know, like Neil Sedaka, usually the name I get big props for. Was, and if I had opportunity, still am, a big fan of karaoke. One reason I quit the worship team, testimony time. Okay, we'll have to hear about that. I like to tell people my wife married me for my voice. I love Hawaii, though. Need to learn how to surf. Yeah, you do. Come on. Stand up, paddleboard, and more of the local things. By the way, J.O.B. You heard of J.O.B. yet? Jamie O'Brien? You got to look up
Okay,
Jamie
I don't know who
O'Brien.
that is, no.
No, he's Hawaii. He's North Shore, and he's got stuff all over YouTube. He has a weekly vlog. And so you're going to love Jamie, and you ought to get Jamie to teach you, except don't just go to the big waves first with him, okay? Well, then make sure you might want to go with his girlfriend, Tina. She does Tina-sized waves. They're small. So maybe we'll get props from Jamie and Tina on this, when they hear about us mentioning their names.
Right.
So anyway, you need to do that. Yeah, you need to get out there because you're Hawaii. And that's what we do when I'm in Florida, I'm in the Orlando area, went to Disney more than any person in his lifetime should ever go, and Universal Studios and all that because of working with students and then family. But what we do, I live an hour from the beach, and I said, when I resigned from the church I was at for 29 years, I thought, once a month we got to get to the beach. But guess what? No, because when you're in a place like Hawaii, like Florida, when you're in a paradise place and you get to work, it's really hard to do the things that are fun to do and that you should be doing because it's good for mental health and all that. So you remember that, have your wife and your child remind you that mental health, Dad, we got to go surf today, do something, right?
Right.
All right.
Exactly.
So anyway, listen. So what you need to do, man, is just catch us up from there. Chase, they're tired of listening to me. Tell us about your life from that point, and where you are today.
Okay. Well, yeah. So I'm Chase, and I've been working with Youth for Christ now since 2018-ish. It's kind of funny how that worked out, but the Lord had a plan altogether. I've been working with Youth for Christ even before I retired from the military, which I'll tell you what. Full-time military job, full-time missionary, ministry job, not an easy thing to do. It definitely took a lot of patience on everybody else's part as I'm trying to lead this organization, this youth group. The chapel, they've been really supportive. We have some great chaplains on staff. And especially now, we've got some really great chaplains that are really supportive of the Youth for Christ mission as a whole, but also of me as the youth leader. And then, like you mentioned, I'm going to Pac Rim Christian University. I'm starting my Bachelor in Theology. I'm doing 4 classes. So now I'm no longer full-time military and full-time ministry. I'm now full-time ministry and full-time student. So I might not should have taken all 4 classes, start off, but I think that's what every college kid does, right? The first year, jump head over heels.
Oh, I can do this. I can do this. Absolutely.
So it's been fun.
You missed it when you were younger, so now as an adult, you're jumping in and doing the same thing anyway.
As you can see behind me, I kind of have a studio set up at my house. One thing that I do want to start working up to is doing YouTube and doing probably not podcasts because I don't have that much good information to share, but I can get on and play Minecraft all day long. So, I'll just do that with the kids.
Right. Exactly.
But, start up a YouTube channel. And I also kind of do some side recording on the side for some local artists when they want to record in a studio. They come over to the house, and I have room over here for a keyboard so they can hook up their keyboard to the computer, and we can get them all mic'd up with the nice microphone and all that kind of stuff. So it's kind of a side, not really a gig because I don't get paid for it. I just do it all for fun because it's what I do.
Yeah. And it's good to have a passion and things like that, number one, because it's healthy. And one thing this podcast is for is about getting people healthy and helping them see things clearly in their ministry, because it's easy to get sidetracked and get consumed. Being consumed is one thing. Being balanced is a better thing and another thing. And so that's where we're always going, always looking for here. Tell me this before we even get into some of the other things. Who was the person or that one person in your adolescence that was your biggest influencer. But was there someone, whether it's a coach, teacher, youth pastor, somebody in your life, in your adolescence? Adolescence is 11 to 25 years of age, probably especially middle school, high school, since that's what you're dealing with.
Yeah, so I will just go ahead and shout out my parents really quick. And this is more just a fun thing that happened today. I went out to wash my car because it was a sunny day, and I turned on Pandora and played 50s rock and roll music. And I think I was washing the car for about 45 minutes to an hour, and I could sing along with every song that was on the radio. There wasn't one I didn't know. And so, my parents, we went to car shows every weekend, and so I just learned all that music. That's what I grew up on. But anyway, so shout out to my parents. But outside of the parental units, I will bring up my youth pastor, Howard. We call him Howie, aka Old Man. And still to this day, I call him Old Man. I do have a fun story that if you want to hear it, we had an interesting time almost burning down our hometown.
That'd be interesting.
With the youth group, we called ourselves the Youth Group Posse because, we're cool like that. Whatever. And every time I go home, it doesn't matter if I'm home for 2 or 3 days or if I'm home for a week, I make sure to call Howard and be like, hey, can we get a lunch or coffee or something and just catch up together? In the military, you don't get to go home that often because either one, you're too far away, or two, you don't have that much time off to get away. And so whenever I did, I would always make sure to go have lunch with them.
So wait a minute, how did you almost burn down the town? Did I miss something there?
I figured you want to hear that story. We let's see if I can tell this story well. So essentially, my parents at the time had this old barn. It used to be a horse barn in their yard, and they wanted to tear it down because they were going to build a larger garage. Because, like I said, my dad and my brother, they're both car guys, so they wanted a big garage. And this horse barn was about 100 years old or so. And so my mom reached out to Howie and said, hey, Howie, do you want the youth group to tear down this barn? And y'all can just make a fundraiser out of it, and I'll donate to the youth group. And Howie, of course, is like, yeah, we'll make it a cookout night, and we'll bring some hot dogs and make some s'mores. And so the weekend before this all happened, it kind of rained and was misty for the entire week. And so when the barn was finally in a pile in the middle of the yard, he thought the great idea was to throw some lighter fluid on it to help it, catch.
Of course.
Because it was kind of wet.
Sure.
But it's 100-year-old dry wood. And so next thing we know, we got this bonfire going, and my mom's got a garden hose spraying down the house just to keep the tiles, cooled down with water. We hear a screeching vehicle on the road. We turn around and look, and some guy stopped his truck, hopped out, analyzed what was going on, hopped back in his truck and took off. And next thing you know, we had the entire fire department at our house. And they were just going to let it burn out because they knew what was going on, because Howie kind of filled them in. My favorite part of that story, though, there's 2 losses, not the favorite part of my story, 2 losses. My buddy's best or favorite hat, he lost his hat in the fire. Yeah. And we lost half a cooler in the fire. But my favorite part of the story is when the cops showed up. Because
this is getting better.
I'm a kid.
Better. Right.
Yeah. I'm a kid. I think I was, sophomore, junior. I don't know. I was in high school. And so me and my buddy, we're rambunctious guys anyway. And to kind of give you a relationship idea, he's Maverick, I'm Goose. That's kind of how we rolled throughout high school. Yeah. And so when the cops showed up, we wanted to go out and talk to them. And me being a kid that I was like, hey, so what'd the call sound like over the radio? Because how do you describe a big bonfire going on in the middle of town? Right. And the officer said, well, actually, I was setting up radar on the outside of town, and I saw a glow coming from the inside of town, and so I thought I'd go check it out. Yeah.
That's hilarious. Well, I tell you what, now at least while you're doing it full time, probably not the best thing to do is burn a building down with your students, but at least hey, you had a garden hose, and it was she already had it ahead of time. That'll put any barn.
I always
fire
tell
out.
my sponsoring chaplain, at the chapel, I'm like, okay, I'm going to tell you the story, but don't fire me afterwards, right?
Right, exactly. Right, and only tell it to certain students that aren't, fire prone. So anyway, that's great. That's great. So anyway, so your biggest influencer was your youth pastor, and other than your parents, what's your parents' first names, by the way, just for fun?
Pat and Charlie.
Pat and Charlie. Okay, that sounds like a story right there. Pat and Charlie just sounds like you should write a book about that. But tell them I said hello, all right? What do you think? But,
all right. Well, hopefully they'll listen to the podcast.
Hopefully they're going to listen to the podcast. That's right. And they're going, look, they said our names, But anyway, so here you are now. You're 3 years into the ministry, from what I understand, from what we're talking about. But almost 2.5 of those years, not quite a half, you were doing that full time and in the military. That's a lot of work. And now school and full time, doing this, a lot of work. The good thing and the hard thing is that you're married. The great thing is your wife will probably go, okay, slow it down. Let's do something. Wives are good at that, right? And reel it back in a little bit here. Let's see if we can save you from burnout or something. And then your 13-year-old daughter, I don't know how she responds, but if she's probably way above average of 13-year-olds, but she'll probably at times go, Dad, why did you say that, when you're in a meeting or something like that, or, she'll be your best critic of what not to say.
Right.
No, exactly. And, but a great time. I'll tell you what, my kids, they grew up in student ministry. I got all those things. Dad, don't do that. Dad, don't say this. And then they'd be very proud at the same time if you got something right. Oh, you did that right. That was good. It's okay. Yay. Yeah, did something right.
Yeah, and I think she's still working on her how do I critique Dad on his messages on Wednesday nights at club.
Eventually she won't ask that. Yeah. She'll just start. But anyway, now is she real soft-hearted and she's like Daddy's little girl?
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Well, that's not a bad thing. I think it's a good thing. I got a daughter. I get that. Tell me about your worst adolescent moment, though. You got a worst adolescent moment for yourself? Excuse me, that we can tell and that you will not be tried for later. I mean, it's just.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't think I have any of those. But no, I don't. I don't know if I have. I'm sure I have a lot of worst moments. And if we had my mom and dad on here, they could probably tell you a story or two.
Yeah.
But, for me, honestly, I don't remember a lot of my high school years. I know I was rambunctious. I know I was not following the Lord, even though I went to youth group. I was, misbehaving. There was I think a month that I decided to try smoking, and then I gave it up because I'd rather put gas in my gas tank than smoke because I wanted to drive. I was a high school kid with a driver's license. So yeah. So I don't really know if I had any worse moments, and if I do, I don't really remember what they would be.
Yeah, okay, and that's understandable. This is all of this is good teaching stuff anyway, because there are different times in adolescence that our brain protects us. And we don't always remember the things that happen to us in certain parts of adolescence because it's a protection mechanism. It's a thing that happens to many students. So what was your worst student ministry moment that you remember at this point?
And I kind of have thought about this, and maybe it's a message for anybody listening or watching. But I don't like to think of things as worst moments, right? Because I think everything is a learning lesson, and I think God puts these things in our life. I also don't like to think of the negative. And so whenever something bad happens, I definitely have a hard time dealing with it, but I don't ever consider it a worst moment because I'm like, okay, well, what can I learn from this? And, recently I had a couple things all happened in the same week, and I can share that on Sunday. This was a couple weeks ago now. I had learned on Monday that one of my good friends here on island passed away on Sunday on a bike ride, and that next week it was spiritual warfare for the entire week. And I mean, Satan chose to use that time to just try to bring me down and bring down the chaplain that I'm working with. And I mean, we had everything from suicidal ideation in the youth group, and we had a couple things before. So at youth group we have have a question box where the kids can like be anonymous and provide either a prayer request or a question about their faith or something that they're struggling with that they're reading or whatever. And we've had a couple notes in there about kids who have been kind of depressive in state. And so I think they're willing, because it's anonymous, to be able to put that question in there. But then we also had a leader decide that he was going to date a student, which I had to let him go, of course, which I think most youth organizations would agree with.
Right.
But that was really tough because he was young, and I get like they're close in age. And, on the outside of ministry, I love the guy to death. He's an awesome guy. We worked really close together. He was very teachable. He was wanting to learn more about how to do ministry and what that looked like. So it was really, really hard to let him go and make that decision. But we did. And, we're going to move on from there. And that was all in the same week. And oh, by the way, we had one other thing going on with club where there was some accusations of bullying happening within the club. And so that was another thing that it was just like thing on top of thing on top of thing. And so it wasn't a worst moment. It was a worst week with everything piled into it.
Yeah. No. That's right. That is a moment that people relate with. If they've been in any time at all, you're going to have something like that's relatable. So what you shared there is no small thing. It's really what people are looking at, and it is spiritual warfare. Things like that happen in all kinds of realms, but they don't think of it as being spiritual if they don't have a relationship with God or they're not seeking that. Those are spiritual too, but we recognize them as spiritual warfare because we understand that we are at war. The great thing about you being in the military and being in ministry full-time now is that I would tell my volunteer staff that we're at war. And I have to remind myself that when we are going into a meeting, when we are living life day to day, we are at war. We are a target. We got a target on our backs. And you understand that, especially because you are military. And some of my best volunteers were military, Marines, Army. Had one guy that actually been in all three. He was a medic in all three, Marines, Army, and Air Force. Great volunteers because you understand chain of command, you understand order, you understand warfare, and those are things that we're all dealing with on a daily basis. But if you're not attuned to that or a little bit longer in your faith, then you don't get that. But as a military person, you start getting those things pretty quickly. And so I like guys like you because of that very thing. You understand the spiritual warfare, and you last longer a lot of times because you're used to enduring. The hurry up and wait thing is a big thing, isn't it? It's a real thing. What was your best moment so far?
So, like you said, I've been doing this for almost 3 years. I mean, the first 2 years, it was just kind of happening because I was still trying to get my feet wet on, like, what does it mean for me to be the guy, because my predecessor had left to Dallas. We're still good friends. We hang out on Zoom every now and then and have chats over the phone. Ministry moment. So COVID, right? COVID kind of struck the nation. And I've always had a mentality, and I don't know if it's because I'm military or because it's just the way that I am, but I've always had this mentality of replace and not cancel. And it was really heartening, I guess, and also like a confirmation that I'm in the right organization with Youth for Christ, that they also came out with replace, not cancel. And so everything that we do ministry-wise, it's like, okay, we had to cancel this, but how can we do it instead? And so when when the country shut down and we here in Hawaii shut down for COVID, I think I took a week off between the last club and the next club so I could figure out what I was doing with Zoom. And then that next week we were on Zoom, and there was just no slowdown at all. It was a trying time to figure out what games to play and keep the kids interested and stuff like that on Zoom. The best ministry moment, I'll finally get to that part of the story.
Right.
That summer, of course, COVID shut down everything. And I had found out, or I had heard about these drive-through graduations. And I was like, well, that sounds like fun. I wonder if I could do that. And so I got to talk to some leaders, and I got a little gift bag together, put a Bible in there, pen set, and a couple other things. And we drove around. We put streamers and banners on our cars. We'd pull up in front of a senior's house, honking our horns and screaming out the window. And then I'd walk up and give them their gift bag and talk to them about hey, where are you going to go to college and all that kind of stuff. Well, not too long ago, like I said, my predecessor had left before, back in 2018. And so some of these kids that were graduating, knew him as their youth leader. While I had a relationship built with them, I knew that it was going to be something special if he was there. And while he was in Dallas, I brought him up on, Google Hangout, FaceTime, whatever you want to call it. Mm-hmm. And I let him talk with them. I just held the phone up like this. I have some pictures of me, like I'm just standing there like with my phone out like this. And, the seniors all loved it. And I think I even got one to almost tear up.
No, that's great. There's moments like that are more spontaneous, that are such God sightings, for people. What was the phrase that Youth for Christ and you use as well that was the same?
Replace, not cancel.
Replace and not cancel. What a huge statement. And I'm sure some have picked up on doing things like that. If you haven't, that is a massive insight. Replace, not cancel.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.